Hi, and welcome to this next video on multiplying a binomial by a binomial. Okay, so when we want to multiply a binomial by a binomial, there's two methods that we can use. So a binomial by a binomial. The first one, we call it FOIL, but it's really not like foil as in paper foil. It means, it's an acronym for FOIL, okay? And we'll talk about that one in just a second. The other method that we use, we call the box method, which is really the same thing as FOIL. It's just a different way of looking at it. So let's investigate those methods. First, we're going to talk about the FOIL. Well, FOIL stands for first, outsides, insides, and last. And what we're talking about are the terms. So the first, the reason we call it the first, it reminds us of how, actually FOIL reminds us of how we're going to distribute two binomials. So I'm going to, if given the following expression, A plus B times C plus D, well, the first is talking about the first terms. Well, what you do is you basically distribute the first term by in the first binomial by the first term in the second binomial. So that's what we say when we mean first. Outsides, basically, it refers to these two outer binomials because you distribute the first term of the first binomial by the last term in the second binomial. So that's where we get our O from, which stands for the outsides, because these are the two outside terms. And then now we call the third step the insides, because we distribute, now we're going to take the second binomial and distribute it, the second term, in the first binomial and distribute it to the second binomial. So first, we distribute the second term in the first binomial to the first term in the second binomial. And so that's why we call that the insides, because these are the two inside terms. So that would be B times C. And so that's our I. And then our last, it's the second term of the first binomial by the second term of the last binomial. And so we call that last because you can see that in both binomials, it's the last term. So that's why we call that L as in last. So we get the acronym FOIL, F-O-I-L, which is just short for telling us the order in which we distribute. Okay, so when we say, how do you multiply a binomial? You don't multiply it by FOIL. You actually multiply it by distributive property. So if I have A plus B times C plus D, what I'm really doing is distributing. I'm distributing A to C and A to D. And then I come back and I distribute B to C and B to D. So you can remember it that way as just plain distributive property, or you can use the acronym FOIL to help you. And later on we'll learn about box. But let's explore FOIL first. Okay, so we know that what we do with FOIL, we saw that. So don't forget at the end to combine any like terms and put your terms in standard form. And put your, put your polynomial in standard form, excuse me. So let's try FOIL out here, all right? So first, outside, inside, last. So let's start with the first terms. We're going to multiply the first terms. So that would be x times x, which will give us x squared. Then now let's multiply the outside terms. So remember, x times 4, so that would be x times 4, which will give us 4x. And then now let's do the inside terms, which will give us 6 times x, which gives us 6x. And then the last terms, so the last terms, which is 6 times 4, which gives us 24. So it says write the final expression in standard form. Well, before we can do that, let's combine our like terms. In this case, we have 4x and 6x, and so that combines to 10x. So when we write our final expression, it's x squared plus 10x plus 24. Okay, so that is our new polynomial expression after multiplying two binomials. Okay, so let's try another one. And actually, I'm going to let you try this one. Okay, so pause the video and work out this problem using what you just learned. First, outside, inside, last, or basically just distribute the first term by each term in the second binomial and the second term by each term in the second binomial. Okay. All right. Well, you should have come up with your multiplying your first term, so 2x times 3x, which will give you 6x squared, and then 2x times negative 1, which will give you negative 2x, and then 7 times 3x, which will give you 21x, and then 7 times negative 1, which will give you negative 7. And when we combine these two terms, we end up with a positive 19x. And so our final answer in standard form is 6x squared plus 19x minus 7. Let's try the next one. Pause the video and see if you can figure this one out. Okay, so let's try negative m times 5m, so that's negative 5m squared, then negative m times negative 1, that gives us positive m, and then negative 1 times 5m gives us a negative 5m, and then negative 1 times negative 1 gives us a positive 1. Do we have any like terms? Well, in this case, we do, m and negative 5m, which becomes negative 4m. So I end up with negative 5m squared minus 4m plus 1. Okay, so if you didn't get that one, go back and practice that one. It's a little tricky because we throw some integer rules in there, so make sure that you're doing those steps correctly. Let's try another one. Okay, so now what we're going to learn actually is how to do multiply two binomials using what we call the box method. So you could also call this the row by column method. So we learned a little bit about the box method. We just didn't call it that in the last video, but this time we're going to learn actually how to use it with two binomials. So let's say I'm given the same expression a plus b times c plus d. Well, basically I'm going to write the terms in my first expression in the left column, or I could write it up top. It really doesn't matter as long as you put each binomial in either a row and either fill it up with a row or a column. Okay, so I have a and b here. So since they both are positive, they both will be positive in the box. Next, I put d and c. Uh-oh, what happened to my c? Oh, it looks like my c is missing. Uh-oh. Let's see if I can go back. Okay, let's go back. So I'm going to put C here because apparently it didn't come up. All right, so let's try that. So what we learned is you multiply the row by the column. So A times C, remember, A times C, that was our first terms. So it still works out the same. And then A times D, that was our outside terms, A times D. So first, outside, and then B times C, that would be our inside terms, still, right? And then B times D would be our last terms again. Okay, so what we still end up with is we're still really using FOIL, we're just using it in a more visual way. F-O-I-L is FOIL. Okay, so let's try that on an actual problem. Alrighty. A times C, A times C, A times D. So if you're wondering how I got the F-O-I-L, it's basically what it's doing. And then B times C, and then B times D. Okay, so I'm still really doing the same thing. I'm just using another visual format to do it. And don't forget at the end to add any like terms and then put your final answer in standard form. Okay, so let's practice using this one. I have 4x plus 1 times x minus 5. So I'm going to go ahead and put my terms 4x 1, they're both positive, and then x. And because we have a minus 5, I'm going to put a negative sign on a 5. So that's going to help me get my integer signs right. So first, I'm going to multiply the first row, 4x, by the first column, x. So that's going to give me 4x squared. And then I'm going to multiply 4x by the second column. So that's going to give me a negative 20x. And then now I'm going to go to the second row, 1 times x. So by the first column, that gives me x. And then 1 times negative 5. And so that's going to give me a negative 5. So I can combine my like terms, right, by circling them and writing what they are. So this is going to be, looks like negative 19. So my final answer, I'm going to put in standard form 4x squared, and that's negative 19x, minus 19x minus 5. And so there, I just did the same thing as FOIL, but I just used the box, okay? So you have to learn both for now, but later on in the year, you'll be able to basically use whichever form you like, okay? Not yet, you still need to learn both, but you can use whatever method you like later. All right, let's try that again. Okay, so pause the video and see if you can work this one out. So remember, we're still using exponent rules, so you'll have to apply those here. Okay, so if you put x squared and 4, and then x squared and negative 4, okay, so don't forget to write a negative if it's a minus, then you are correct. So now let's multiply it out. X squared and x squared is x to the 4th. That's the product of a power rule. And then x squared times negative 4 gives me negative 4x squared. 4 times x squared gives me positive 4x squared. And then 4 times 4 gives me a negative 16. Okay, so let's look for like terms. Okay, it looks like we have a negative 4x squared and a positive 4x squared. And so those two are actually going to cancel each other out. So what I'm left with in standard form is x to the 4th minus 16. Okay, so you can go back through these problems anytime you wish and practice them, or there's plenty more problems where that came from. And we'll do some more practice in class. All right, let's try one more. Pause the video and see if you can get this one. Okay, so we should have written, and I'm going to do this one a little differently just to show you it doesn't matter which column you put it in, but it does change the order of your FOIL, but in the end it comes out the same. So I'm going to use E and F squared on top this time, and then I'm going to use 2F and negative 3EF on the bottom. So I'm still going to do my row by column. 2F times E is 2EF. 2F times F squared is 2F cubed. And then negative 3EF times E is negative 3E squared times F. And then negative 3EF times F squared is negative 3EF cubed. So now let's put everything in standard form. It doesn't look like we have any like terms here. So let's look at the highest degree. Well, here I have an F cubed and an E, right? So that gives me a total power of 4. So that's negative 3EF cubed. And then the next highest power, well, I have F cubed and I have E squared F. Well, if we look at alphabetical order, this one has an E and this one doesn't, and E comes before F, so it's going to be minus 3E squared F, because remember F has a power of 1 that we can't see, so that's a degree of 3, and this one is a degree of 3. So then now we put plus 2F cubed, which comes next, and then E has a power exponent of 1 and F has an exponent of 1. So then that's going to be plus 2EF because the order is 2. So this one had an order of 4. This one had an order of 3. This one had an order of 3, but alphabetical order 1. And then this one had an order of 2. So it's in standard form. So negative 3EF cubed minus 3E squared F plus 2f cubed plus 2ef. And that is our final expression in standard form. That one was a little challenging, and that's probably a high-level problem for you guys, but of course the more practice and the more practical or challenged you are, then the better you'll be at this. Okay, so practice makes perfect. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video, and you can tune in for the next video in order to learn how to multiply a binomial and a trinomial.